All right. So I got a little game of brilliant, broken, or berry for you. So
Okay.
basically, I'm going to ask you about. So we talked about this before the show, and we talked about it being a game, right? Like I'll ask you, I'll give you three games. You tell me which one you would prefer to come out brilliant. You have to pick one that comes out brilliantly, one that comes out broken, and one that just gets canceled or buried.
Okay.
Um, but what I'm actually going to ask you is entire franchises. Um,
Oh,
so Um,
switcheroo.
so, uh, so yeah, again, this is Brilliant, Broken, or Barry. So you have to pick. All right, which franchise has every game from for the rest of our time comes out and it comes out great. You love it. Which and then but another franchise you get to that out of the three comes out where it's like all the games come out broken. Think maybe anywhere from like as much of a mess of like Battlefield 2042 to or like Redfall or something, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just a mess. But you still get the games,
Mm-hmm.
and then another frame. Then the one has to get totally buried. Never get another game from them,
Never get
from the
another game.
franchise.
Okay. And that I'm already not liking this question because taking it from the scope of one game to a franchise is just insanity. It makes it way more
I wanted
difficult.
to throw something a little bit like so I just wanted to throw a shock at you, right?
Huge curveball.
So here's your three franchises. So you've got Halo, Resident Evil,
Oh,
or Fallout, and Fallout.
oh, that is that is
Brilliant,
tough.
broken, or Barry.
Okay, so Halo, Resident Evil, or Fallout.
Fallout.
Um, so broken. Am I assuming that this series lives on, but I get mediocre installments, or it's gonna be like like media? You know, I mean, there's some mediocre games in the Resident Evil franchise, so those are still exist as is, and then future ones are
Yeah,
kind
right.
of
Sure.
iffy.
So broken, yeah, it comes out is just like, there's it's very like controversial in
Oh
some way.
yeah,
It's controversial in some way. Whether it's gameplay is broken, right? Like you've got and people are really split and divisive on it or it comes out and it is just it's something like Redfall, which there was broken gameplay, but there was also just like the core game was not good, right?
right, right.
And that, but that's hard because that's a new IP to like compare to, but like, yeah,
Yeah,
just
but
think,
the concept, yeah,
yeah. Battlefield 2042, I guess, right? You get to
that's a
play
good
Battlefield,
example.
right? There's a beloved series of Battlefield, right? But that we had all kinds of fun playing Battlefield, but Battlefield 2042 came
Right.
out and you could play it.
Kind of.
But you didn't really want to.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
totally.
you could kind of play it, and yeah.
Okay, so for the listeners, repeat the franchises again one more time.
So we've got Halo,
Yep.
Resident Evil, and Fallout.
Oh. So Fallout, a lot of listeners, maybe me included, I've played the original one and two, right? But maybe some people haven't played those. So the history kind of really starts at Fallout 3, kind of that 360 era. Um, Man, I'm going to. Uh, the buried is the hardest question, right? Because which one
You're
of
like,
these do
I
you
would
just wipe
never
off the
get
map?
another game.
I would
Yep,
never get it. So I still have the ones that came out, but I never get another
sure.
game again. Okay. So I
Yep.
still have the ones that came out. I never get another one again. I'm gonna bury Resident Evil. I think that's the reason I would do that is there's so many good games in the franchise. They've done a handful of remakes already, so you can experience those in a more optimized or fresh way. And yeah, there's only a handful of missteps in that franchise, so that might be the best one to bury and just cut it off right now. I'll play what we have. Brilliant and broken.
Retire in
So
its prime.
yeah, yeah. So man, the Halo franchise has had huge missteps lately, and that's up for debate and like story and gameplay and multiplayer and live action or live service rather. So it's kind of in a broken state anyway. And so basically, the question is: do you want to continue that, or do you want to go back to the glory days with that franchise? Um, I've got to say, leave it broken. Leave it broken. Let them stumble through this
Okay.
and figure it out. Maybe it'll encourage them to go different routes. Like we got Halo Wars and stuff. Maybe we'll see some different things in the universe. And I think Fallout needs a great game. I think there was missteps with 4 and 76 in different ways.
Definitely 76, sure.
Yeah, so if you come out with a 5 that's just bang on, I mean, that's it, man. I want the
Yeah,
brilliant Fallout franchise. Um,
that's
so, so is that what you expected from me? And maybe
no,
quick thoughts
no.
from
So
you?
I expected you to say broken for Fallout because you're like Fallout comes out broken anyway, and we still love it, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe like in the spirit of the game, right? Like it's gonna be maybe a little bit more broken than it is, but it's like Bethesda. That's a part of its charm for some people almost.
Yeah.
But so I just assumed you would go broken there, and yeah, Halo. I thought you would want to keep because it's just like it needs its redemption, right? Like
Hmm.
I personally I Infinite's my favorite Halo game since Halo Reach,
Hmm.
since Bungie.
Hmm.
But yeah, but as far as like multiplayer, I hardly touched it. I played it right, like actually I played it more in the beta probably than or whatever prior to launch
Yep.
than I did after post launch. Um, and I'm Halo 2 is my jam. That was when it comes to multiplayer. And but we also we have Master Chief Collection and stuff, so it's just like Halo would still live on at least for as it is right now. So I don't know. I didn't know. I was kind of surprised you let that you picked Fallout to be the brilliant. And I wasn't really sure what you picked between Halo and Resident Evil. I know those are three franchises you love. For me, this would have been easy. Resident Evil. I have plenty of Resident Evil games to play that I've never played before anyway. So
Hmm.
I've only played a good chunk of five, and other than that, I've not really played other
Which is one of
Resident
the
Evil
more
games. So
controversial in the entire franchise. So you're
right,
missing
yeah,
out.
absolutely. But we played that co-op, right? So
Yeah.
that was fun. Yeah. So
Very cool.
but
Maybe if you're a listener, viewer of this show, what are your thoughts on this? Maybe you can ask this same question to your friends or family. Feel free to ask us as well. Pop into the Discord or leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. But hey, maybe we should jump into the show now.
let's go.
Hey, welcome to the show. This is the Remote Play Gaming Podcast, and I'm Mark with my co host, Evan. And we're going to jump into some things about games that we love and just what's upcoming this year. Evan, anything you want to say before we start the show?
I mean, just happy to be back. I'm glad we're doing our second episode, and I'm hoping to sound a lot better in this episode than I did the last one. So,
Yeah, yeah, huge improvement. We've changed the mic setups, the microphones, got a boom, all that stuff to adjust the audio levels and everything. So we are improving. This should be a huge, over 100% improvement from the episode one, and we'll continue to get better. And hopefully, it sounds good for you guys on the other end. So yeah, let's just kick it off today, and we'll just talk maybe about some current news type stuff. Let's jump into some rumors and maybe not rumors, some speculated, informed speculation, if you will, right, from different people on the internet. So just about upcoming hardware for consoles. And we just got news today, as of this recording, that there's some rumors that Xbox is spinning up some more hardware. Is it a pro version? Is it a digital only version of their current offering? Is the Stream Stick coming back? And then we have to think also from the other two companies of the big three, Nintendo and Sony, what are they spinning up? There's been a lot of rumors about the PS5 Pro, and then of course the Switch 2 or whatever the Switch successor is, Super Switch, whatever you may want to call it, Super Switch U. I don't know what crazy name they're gonna come up with, but yeah, what are your thoughts maybe on these Xbox rumors, and then you can touch briefly on the other two consoles.
sure. Yeah, I think we'll jump into this in a future episode as far as like this will be a deeper topic. It's really once we get probably some kind of substantial evidence on any one of these things.
Hmm.
But yeah, so um, I actually missed the Xbox news today, but I've had some thoughts on how they might respond to what I think are probably substantial. I think Tom Henderson came out with some of the rumors on the PS5 Slim,
Hmm.
saying something like this year, which I don't know. They came out with that Spider-Man edition console, the base console for Spider-Man. So I'm like, would they do a Slim right after doing the special edition for the
Right,
Spider-Man?
right.
I don't know, but. The PS5 Pro there's been a lot of talk about that coming out like next year. And I mean, it seems like a Sony thing to do. Like, all right, let's repeat what we did so successfully last year or last gen, and get at it. And there's been Phil has said at times recently, the Xbox Series X is our mid-gen refresh, right? Like at the beginning of the generation, the Series X is our mid-gen refresh. It's the most powerful console there is. And it's like, well, do they respond though? Like if PS5 Pro comes out and it's substantially, more powerful,
Right.
and a lot of what I'm hearing is that it will come with it. You'll be able to buy separately. It'll be a digital console, and you'll be able to buy a disc drive separately. The speculation is like it comes out at $500, and then for $100 you can have the disc drive.
And this is the Xbox side of things or the PlayStation? Which one?
This is the PlayStation side of things. So the PS5 Slim and the PS5 Pro would come out with no disc drive, and then you would just get like a USB-C attachment to plug in a disc drive, and so that would allow them to say, oh yeah, the PS5 Pro comes out at the same price as the Series X, right? And but really, it's like, well, you don't have the disc, but it's just like we've seen how far digital has gone. So I'm like, does Xbox respond with the Series XL or whatever, or or the Series X Pro? And
do they want to get in an arms race? Do they want to do that? Is this a hardware arms race, like a power?
So I have kind of a speculation that I haven't really heard out there, so it's probably way off. But my little tinfoil hat theory here is so they launched the Xbox 360 a year before the PS3, right? And Xbox 360 is easily their most successful console. And I'm wondering, maybe they just come out with a digital Series X at $400 to at least match the PS5 Slim. And 2025 we get next gen from Xbox.
That fast?
The Wii U was sooner. I'm sorry, the Switch was sooner from the Wii U, right?
That's true.
And the Xbox to 360, which, I mean, it's way different time now, but the Xbox to 360, the original Xbox was only 4-year lifespan, right? It was 4 years before the 360 came out.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just like, all right, instead of doing this mid-gen refresh, let's come out and we're next gen. We're kicking off next gen. That brought us success before. This gen was just kind of people are just feeling like, oh, this gen's feels like it's just getting started because like COVID and all that stuff. So I don't know. I think that could be something. I think I would love to be called the Super Nintendo Switch. I think that would be so cool. Cool callback. I mean, and I think they have a larger audience in our generation, the 30s and 40s, than they have for their last several. I think that's a much larger demographic for them now than it has been previously.
Yep.
So it would obviously touch on that, but maybe if they're wanting to draw, I don't know. I think it'd be cool. But anyway, I think that's coming out next fall.
So let me ask you a couple questions or have a couple thoughts on the Xbox thing. So we know that I think Phil and team have said it before that selling the hardware is not necessarily what makes them money, right? Are they still taking a loss even on some of the hardware?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thought I had. And then the second one is the Series S is by and far their best seller, right? That's making them...
I know. I thought the Series S was underperforming.
I don't know if that's all perspective, right? If they have a financial goal.
If they expected it to sell 2-to-1 and it's only selling, 3-to-2, then yeah, I guess it could still be underperforming, but still be the best seller. But I don't know. I'm really just not sure, so I don't want to speak to whether it is or not.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. And if you're a listener of the show, definitely feel free to comment on this. But I'm pretty sure the Series S is one of their best sellers, and that's kind of come up with the controversy of the parity thing, where features that are available on the Series X must be available on the Series S, and they're sticking to their guns on that because there is such a large install base relatively for the Xbox platform with the Series S. So my third thought on this, and this idea from you of jumping into the next gen right away is ultimately what is their goal, and I think it's Game Pass, right? So how can we hit the most users? How can we get a large install base and get these guys on Game Pass as soon as possible? And you're not wrong. Another console would do that, but I'm leaning away from the arms race, and I'm wondering: is it a stream stick? Is it integration with TV partners?
Yeah,
And we're just getting you streaming the games, and maybe that's why this was such a big deal in the merger and with these different regulatory bodies, because they really need this streaming piece. I think because that's going to
sure.
boost those Game Pass sales. So I think we're thinking in the same lines, but you're thinking let's go all in, heavy hardware, heavy hitter. We're going to beat out Sony and get subscribers. Whereas I'm thinking lighter and streaming. And what are your thoughts
Right.
on that?
Yeah, I think I feel like Phil wants to be the most powerful and the most accessible, right? I want to be the lowest. He wants to be on both ends of the spectrum. I want to be the lowest cost of entry, and I also want to be the most powerful console. So then, they cover you on both sides. If they've got something for everybody, kind of thing. They do have, I think it's called Project Keystone out there, that is rumored to be that streaming stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so queue times have been increasing for xCloud, and there's been a lot of conversation about them not being like, they've had shortages and all that stuff. And Phil came in at the showcase this year and said that the supply is going to be ramping up. They're going to be able to meet demand better. I'm kind of wondering if they are reducing if they were able to just ramp up manufacturing and just meet all the needs that they need for xCloud, meet all the needs for consumers, or if they kind of took from, okay, xCloud's not taking off the way we expected it so far. We still can't put units on shelves. We need to pull some units from, that we're putting future units that we're putting toward xCloud and actually reroute that to going to the consumer. So because we have Starfield coming out, and if we want people to play it, we got to have something to play it on. And
100%. Yeah.
so I don't know. With I think that's the thing that would be holding Keystone back right now. I think that thing is probably ready, ready to
So you're
go. It's
thinking the
probably been
back
ready
end
to
and the
go.
logistics is what's
Yeah, they're like,
yeah.
we can't support something, a stick that comes out at $100 with, or $150 with a controller,
Everyone's got
and
one.
all of a sudden we sell 10 million and we can't support the queue, right? People got to
Right.
wait 20 minutes and then they get all pissed off and we have a bad product, right?
Yeah.
So
Failure by your own success, right? Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and
So the
let me ask you another question if you don't mind. So, just talking
Mhm.
about all these potentially different consoles coming out, whether it's a mid refresh, a next gen, quote unquote next gen, I have two thoughts that come to mind. One is what is the advertising or marketing that these companies do? Let's say Sony for sure, because we're pretty solid on a PS5 Pro or Slim or both coming out within the next 1 to 2 years. What is the marketing like? What is the advantage to the consumer? Do they come out and say, "Hey, this thing can technically do 8K," and is like, how many people have 8K TVs? Do they say, "Hey, we're at 4K, 100 FPS or 60 FPS locked on everything"? Like, what is the
right.
what gets people to buy it?
Why? Yeah. Why? If we're not even taking advantage of the hardware that was promised in 2020 that we got,
Right.
then what? Yeah. So, and I think even in 2020, 8K on the box, right?
Hmm.
Nobody expected, and like something like what is it, Falconeer or some one of those games that came out early on. I think even the Tourist, like it renders at 8K and then gets down, like whatever.
Hmm.
I don't know all the technical terms, but it just comes out onto your TV at 4K. But
Hmm.
I think no, I think that's a really good point, and I think that's kind of where I think Xbox is at, and where their head is at, as far as like the technology. They're just like, what are we gonna promise? We're hardly. We're just trying to meet the promises we have. Yeah, maybe Starfield runs at 4K 60, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But instead of the 4K 30, but I don't think frame rate is selling the consumer as much as is grabbing the consumer as much as resolution has in the past, right? Like when it was like 1080p, when it was HD, and then when
Hmm.
it was 4K, like that was just like people were like, oh, I gotta have that 4K, oh, I gotta have that 1080p,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta, I, and also we're kind of getting to a point where like graphics are like, it's a point of diminishing returns, right? Like
Hmm.
it can
Hmm.
only look so much better, without like stopping and zooming and like like getting it. I'm sorry for I'm on video doing things. But
It's all
for
good.
an audio podcast, but um, basically, like people are getting their magnifying glass out to like to determine the differences
So many
sometimes in these
pixels.
graphics, and it's just
Yeah.
like like all right, well, when I'm run, like I'm moving fast, it's like I'm not gonna notice the difference when I'm playing these things, and so it's like,
100%. And that's
and
where
that's why
frame
people
rate
do
comes
want
in.
frame rate.
Exactly. And
But
to your point,
I think to the
though,
average, go
exactly.
ahead.
Yep. Nope. I'm
Yeah, I
I'm
was just saying, I think
100%
to
tracking.
the average gamer or the average consumer, right? The frame rate doesn't mean a difference. I mean, honestly, to me, like I notice, I could like I think about Cyberpunk when it came out, and which we Series X ran relatively well compared to the rest of the any other platform it was running on, but I remember that like the quality mode versus the performance mode or whatever, it's just kind
Hmm.
of I could definitely tell the difference, but like when I was running at 30 frames per second on Cyberpunk, like I didn't notice I was getting an inferior experience
Right.
until I looked at it at 60, and I was like, oh, that's different. But if I went
Yeah.
back to 30, and I did it a couple times, I'd go back to 30 and be like, oh, I noticed that this is a little choppier, and then I forgot about it 20 minutes
But
later.
you would prefer the 60, right? Like ultimately knowing both,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. And so
yeah,
I
I
think
think so. And especially in like multiplayer game stuff, which I don't do as much as I used to, but like I
mhm.
do like to jump into them now and then. But yeah, I think for games it's a lot more important for fighters and stuff like that. But fighters typically I think are hitting that 60 frame. I mean, 120 frames would be great, right? But
Yeah.
a lot of people, again, back to the average consumer doesn't have a TV or know to set their TV to
Exactly.
run at 120 frames per second.
Yeah, so that's the
Um,
marketing challenge, right? Is like, how do you educate the mass consumer that this is good? It was very easy to your point, 1080p HD. This is 4K, and this is 8 because HDR came with that, so you could really tell the difference between these things. But even I think frame rate is critical, and a lot of people that probably listen to this podcast are gamers, and they're probably be like, "Hey, you guys are dum dums." Like, of course, frame rate's important, but again, to the mass consumer, to your Bob's your uncle, you know what I mean? Like your cousin, your niece, like they don't know that. They are looking at what is the game, what is the theme, does it look good, is the commercial good, you know what I mean? The
right.
cutscenes, that type of thing. But if you do play 30 to 60 or even 120, you can tell the difference, right? So I did a little
Yeah.
experiment with my wife, Marvel Snap, a simple card game, right? They have a 30 FPS mode and a 60 FPS, and so I'm on an iPhone 14 Pro Max, and I put it on 30 FPS. I'm like, here, try this. And she's playing it. Okay. She's like, what's the deal? And I said, all right, and I'm going to switch this. Boom. Switch it back. And she's like, whoa, this looks like a totally different game. And it really does.
Wow.
Especially with the animations, right? Now, again, that's a card game on a smaller screen where you can really see that versus,
Sure.
I don't know, Callisto Protocol or something random. Um, and you can't tell as much to your point as in motion. But yeah, this all ties back to what is the value of these new consoles and how do you sell them, and it'll be interesting to see. And further thinking into the future, I'm wondering if Sony's kind of pushes more VR. They've already got a little bit of a foothold in there. Is that their next thing versus 8K? Whereas Xbox's is streaming and getting you on any platform they can, and Switch is still that mobile, whatever they come up with. Nintendo's art always got those different ideas. So I don't know. My head's constantly thinking about those things as a gamer and a podcaster. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's that was a really good question. And then that's something I love to think about, talk about and stuff. But we should probably move on to some of our main topics. So you want to
Sure.
tell me what some of those are?
Yeah, sure. So today we just thought we'd let you guys know maybe a little bit more about ourselves, but also talking concurrently about what we've played this year and what's upcoming and maybe game of the year discussions. So you'll learn a bit more about us as gamers and gamer dads that are trying to squeeze in these games with the limited amount of time we have. But also, hopefully, it correlates to some stuff you've played or want to hear about. Maybe you haven't played and you're curious about our thoughts. So I think we're going to start off with, hey, Evan, what have you played this year?
Yeah, so I have actually beaten 9 games this year so far, and that's a good year for me. I think 2017 I beat more, but I don't usually beat that many games. I probably play a lot of games, but
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, but yeah. So and then I've played several others, but I'll just go through some of these real quick. So Hi-Fi Rush was the first game I beat this year. It was great seeing Hango, leave the horror genre and come out with something completely different and so cool and so much fun and just so much character in that game.
And a shadow
Um,
drop to boot, right? So that was cool.
and a shadow drop, yeah. I have a couple shadow drops in here, and or at least a few. Yeah, so love that game. It was kind of a different genre for me, but I'm so glad I played it and beat that. Hellblade was, these are some Game Pass games, right? But
Mm-hmm.
uh, finally played Hellblade. It was kind of like there's a little bit of excitement at some point about Hellblade 2. We're still not really seeing a whole lot more from it, but
Mm-hmm.
can't wait to see more from it. But I finally jumped into that. I remember that looking at being like such a graphical showcase when it came out for an indie team to
Oh yeah.
and now Ninja Theory but has they're a full-blown AAA studio with Xbox's investment into them. And but yeah, that was a really cool game. And then Game Boy Advance and Game Boy games dropped on the Switch Online,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a shadow drop. So there's Super Mario Land 2. That took me a couple hours to beat that. Playing with my kids.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and because I Super Mario Brothers, I think the original Super Mario Brothers is like the only 2D Super Mario game I think I've beaten prior to that. So,
Wow. Yeah.
um, as a Nintendo kid, right? Like
You've got
I'm
some
more of a Zelda.
homework. You got some homework
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, for sure. And I've tried other ones, but um, yeah. So I guess now I've got my second game that like, I saw a quick one to beat. I was looking at Super Mario Advance with the lost chapters or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was, and that was like 30 hours. I was like, I'll get to it. I'm gonna beat this. I can beat this one in a couple mornings here, in the morning with my kids. So, um, and then I moved to the other Shadow Drop from that same direct, Metroid Prime Remaster.
There you go.
Um, and that was the first time I'd beaten Metroid Prime. So I had Metroid Prime way back in the GameCube. And I was getting pushed in the back in the on that first level when you're on the ship, and it's just like you got to race to the get off the ship. And I was like, oh, I hate this. I don't like this. And
You don't like that pressure, right?
yeah, I don't like the pressure. It's that is a pattern, that's similar to, I talked about being on a leash last week with or a couple weeks ago with Pikmin and
Mm-hmm.
Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask has kind of a combination of those two things,
Yep.
but that's going to be a common pattern for me for games that I don't really care for, and especially when I was younger, I did not care for it.
Yep.
Well, then I was like, all right, I got to give this an honest shot. People are saying that this is one of the greatest games of all time, 10 out of 10, da da da. And it's
Yeah.
like, again, I'm supposed to be a Nintendo kid, and I haven't played one of their masterpieces. And so
Unbelievable.
from the time that I was like at the height of my Nintendo gaming and on the 64, the GameCube era there. So I gave it a shot. I got past that part, and then like once you get past that part, you don't really have as much of that like pushed in the back, and it just turns into just an awesome, awesome, awesome puzzle game. Not
Mm-hmm.
not so great at the platforming, but at least in my opinion. But I loved I love that game. It's probably my third favorite game. Well, I'd say now fourth favorite game after Tears of the Kingdom that I
Oh
played
wow.
on the Switch.
Okay, so Switch
Um,
games. Switch games.
on the Switch, yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
But which is really high praise. Isn't necessarily for most consoles, like fourth highest game, whatever, but like the Switch has two of my favorite two games, so
Yeah. Yeah.
of all time. So and then Super Mario Odyssey would be also I think above that. But
Really quick, at
um,
what point
yep.
are we gonna get to gamer dad level where it's like, man, I hate this part of the game. Hey, son, daughter, could you beat this for me really quick? You guys play this part. Play the beginning of Metroid, and then I'll
Right,
do the
right.
rest.
I don't feel like doing this crap, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you do it. Yeah, like you want to play games here, do this part that I don't want to do.
Right. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I'm curious to see what our generation, like this generation, goes compared to the previous, because it's like we grew up with gaming in a
Hmm.
different way, right?
Yep.
Uh, but Sonic Spinball, and, another great. Honestly, it was a great classic game on the Switch Online there. Superliminal, which is I talked again a couple weeks ago about Portal 2 is one of my favorite games ever, and anything that resembles that puzzle solving that Portal 2 has,
Scratches that
which
itch, right?
yeah, and the first couple hours of Superliminal really does that. It's a pretty short game, but I'm really glad I played that game, and it just like it kind of took me like, all right, I gotta see what else is out there that is inspired by Portal.
Yeah, and that's an indie
Um,
title. Yeah, I haven't played
yeah,
it.
that was on Game Pass. So,
Oh, okay, cool.
the only game on here so far that I've played that was not a subscription was Metroid Prime.
Okay. But
Everything
there's
else was
nothing
either
wrong with
on.
that. That's the whole point
Yeah.
of things like Game
It,
Pass, where you can jump in, give it a try. Maybe you like it, you beat it. Maybe you don't. You put it down and move on, and there's no love lost, right? No cash loss. You're good to
Absolutely,
go.
yeah. So I was able to, play all these games at, cost that, an additional cost. The only additional cost was Metroid Prime. So it's just like I really get my value out of the subscription services,
Totally.
that I subscribe to. And the next one that I also had, well, I got it from my son for Christmas. So was Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, which was the original Link's Awakening was the first video game that I ever owned. I got
Hmm.
it for Christmas with a Game Boy way back, in the early '90s, and it was the first video game that I ever owned. Not Legend of Zelda DX, the one that was in the color and had it was the original Link's
Link's
Awakening.
Awakening.
But
Yeah.
I played the crap out of it as a kid. I never beat it. I moved by the time I like got to the point where I could probably beat it. Pokemon came out, and then Pokemon, my Game Boys all became Pokemon machines,
Right.
for the
Right.
most part.
Appropriately, as
And-
one would. Yeah.
yeah, which I could show you on screen, but I have a Game Boy Pocket on my desk with Pokemon Silver in it right now. So,
Money.
uh, um, and then the next game I beat, which I was trying to get one more game in right before Tears of the Kingdom launch, and that was Limbo. Back to another puzzle like
Hmm.
platformer type of game. Um, I enjoyed it. I expected to like it more than I did, just because of all the praise it got. But I also have Inside that I want to play as well. By the same developers there, that same team
Okay.
that created Limbo. I think it's considered a sequel.
Yeah, I think
But
Limbo was first. It's pretty old, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Might have been an
and
iPad game at once time or something.
maybe I remember getting it on Steam back in college. I don't know,
Yeah.
2013 or 2012 or something like that.
Yep.
But yeah, so like I said, I enjoyed it. I hope to like it a little more than I did, but yeah. And then Gone Home, I just beat this past week. So
Cool.
um, uh, yeah, it was a decent game. I kind of like a narrative adventure. I like, or now and then it was a little bit creepy, which is kind of cool. Um, but so yeah, I guess I was just kind of running through the list I've played and a little bit of feedback, but I think we'll get further into. I'll bounce it back to you, so I'm not dominating the conversation here. To see some of the stuff that you've played. I've got a lot of other stuff that I've played so far this year, but those are the games I've beaten.
Okay, totally. I don't have a separate list of what I've beaten, but I do have what I've played, and I can run through them really fast, and then maybe we circle back and talk about a couple of them. And I definitely think we'll probably talk about Tears of the Kingdom since we've got several hundred hours combined
Oh yeah,
between that. Then we can get into maybe some Game of the Year type stuff as we go on throughout the show. So this year played Stray. That's that cyberpunk cat type game that I talked about in the last episode a couple weeks ago. My daughter loves that game, taught her a lot about video games and moving into 3D space, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. And it is coming to Xbox soon. Jedi Survivor, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so definitely played that through. Played it on the hardest difficulty, gotta be the Jedi Master, right? There was a couple boss fights, extremely difficult. I'm not going to do any spoilers of who's in the game, but there's some of them, and I just had to put the controller down and walk away for a while.
you're you're the hard mode guy on this podcast for sure.
Yeah, definitely, right? Like I like the challenge, and I don't know why it's like masochistic in a way, like, and I'm not even like a huge Souls fan or something like a Soulsborne fan. Like I love
Right,
those
right.
games, but I don't know. I'm just certain games I just like. Let me put it to the max and like see what I can do here. Which
I like my 2D platformers to be really hard and fast.
yeah, that's
Um,
true.
Anything else I pretty much like to be just
You like
easy.
your own pace, right? Like you want to
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
it, yeah. Whereas I'm a
yeah.
more
Pace is a big
directed.
thing.
Like,
Yeah.
and I
Or-
think I like a lot of games like Last of Us, Uncharted, and they're kind of narrowly focused. Not that I don't like open world, but they're narrowly focused, drive you and push you forward. It was whereas you just talked about one level in Metroid, you're like, don't push me, just let me do my
Yeah,
thing.
right.
So that's
I
cool.
gotta explore every little nook and cranny, right?
Yeah,
And
and there's
I'm
all sorts
trying to
of
adjust that.
games and types of gamers, so it's all right.
Sure.
So going through the list, Diablo 4, played a lot of that. Marvel Snap, played a lot of that. I'm actually cutting back on the Snap a little bit. Not a big fan of some of the changes they've been making and
Hmm.
finding that time going into other games. Pikmin 4, I was actually just playing that last night some more. Really enjoying that actually as I'm unlocking more features. There's some RPG elements in there, kind of like leveling up your Ochi, the dog, and he gets different skills and stuff, and you can buy gear. So it's like, wait a second. We talked about this being kind of an RTS, but there's RPG elements here too, and there's even like a challenge mode. And I don't remember if this was in the first two. There's like a Dandori challenge mode, which you may not like because you're under the clock, but you go in, you have like 5 minutes. You got to collect all this stuff as fast as you can. So really RTS elements. I'm going to throw some red Pikmin here while these yellow Pikmin do this, while these blue Pikmin do this, and I'm going to use the rest of them to fight this guy. And you're managing all these things to get under
A
the 5 minute clock.
micromanagement simulator is what what I hear it called. Which
Yeah, and you're cringing. You're like, no, no.
yeah.
Tears of the Kingdom, played that, beat that, and we'll talk more about that later. Midnight Suns, Marvel's Midnight Suns. So I'm a big XCOM
Hmm.
fan from back in the day, and I like card games and deck builders, and they combine those two elements, and they did a pretty good job. There's some things that were lackluster, um, but I enjoyed it a lot. Didn't beat it yet. Fire Emblem Three Houses, still working through that as my side game. Pokemon Snap, my wife and I play periodically, and we actually played it last week. It's just fun taking some pictures, and we kind of compete in a way like, oh, I'm gonna take better pictures, but then when we do take the pictures and it's an awesome one, we're both like celebrating together, right? So it's like that competitive cooperative in a way. Ghost of Tsushima, I just started,
Hmm.
and I had a hard time putting it down. So cool.
Yeah.
Really cool thing I liked about that was the the way you set your waypoints. You don't really like set a waypoint. You can pick a mission to do or whatever, but the UI is pretty minimal, and there's this gust of wind, like a breeze, that shows you which way you need to go. It's like the spirit of your father is blowing the wind and guiding you, and it's just a really cool open world design element. And the last couple
That
I
is
have, go ahead.
I was to say that is been my most anticipated game to come to Steam.
Mm,
From PlayStation. They've started putting these games on Steam, and they've all been Steam Deck verified. I think there was maybe one that was not, but
mhm.
maybe Forspoken or something like that. Um, but yeah, no, Ghost of Tsushima and I think I'd say probably Ratchet and Clank have been like the two ones
Yeah,
that I want to try. And Ratchet and Clank finally came.
it just came out, right?
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so still waiting on Ghost of Tsushima. There's a lot of rumors that it's coming. The last I checked, but there's not been any confirmation. But
Yeah, I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. It's pretty cool. It's got the open world elements, but a little more focused, right? So you can go off and do things, sure, but it kind of tells you like, hey, here's the five main things you can do. Here's like the main story. Have at it, and there's just cool design elements, cool aesthetic theme. If you're into Japanese culture, samurai, and those types of things, you can even set so you can play it in English with subtitles. You can play it in Japanese with English subtitles, and you can even set it to black and white like an old Kurosawa film.
oh
So
wow,
yeah, so right now I'm doing the full color Japanese with the English subtitles. Pretty cool. You got to make sure you pay attention and read what's going on.
sure,
But a lot of fun in that regard. And the gameplay's
yeah.
good. Gameplay's good. So
Gameplay's good and it's a beautiful game, right? I
yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's not the best looking game
oh okay,
on the PS5, but it's up there, right? It looks good.
sure.
And then my last three games that I played are Alan Wake Remastered, so I picked that up on the PS for this past month, and trying to
Hmm.
get through that to prep for Alan Wake 2, which probably we'll touch on a little bit later. But there's mini episodes or chapters in this game. I'm on chapter 4, I think, or 5, and it's not bad. I hope it's much improved in Alan Wake 2, which it looks like it will be. But it's an enjoyable game. The gameplay loop is all right. It's more about the story and the narrative than anything. And then the final two I had were Age of Empires 2 and Halo Wars 2 that you and I played a little bit together. So
Yeah, yeah. So I downloaded Alan Wake. I had it on Steam. Now you have me a little hesitant. It's a short game,
it
so
is super short, right? Like I've played it
yeah,
maybe 5 to 6 hours so far, and I'm like over halfway through the game, right? So,
yeah.
and I'm going around trying to collect some of the stuff that's there, but the kind of the core loop is that you have this isn't really a spoiler. Like you have a flashlight, you have a gun or whatever weapon, and these like ghost type guys, you have to shine your flashlight on them for X amount of time for their kind of quote unquote armor to break, for them to become corporeal instead of ethereal, and then you can actually shoot them and damage them with guns, right? So there's a lot of running around, shine your flashlight or use a flare or whatever source of light, break their armor, so to speak, then take them out and proceed to the next area. And it's just different iterations of that. Maybe the guy's a little tougher, or the guy has a chainsaw or something. It's not
Mm.
overly scary type game, but it does have that thriller, spooky. It's like Stephen King light, right? Stephen King's even mentioned in the game because the game's about an author and supernatural things going on. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you could have picked it up on PlayStation, or if you have an old copy on Steam. I don't know how the non-remastered would work.
I want to say it is remat. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's probably super cheap, right? Like we could check that out
Yeah.
here in a little bit. But yeah, check it out because I think the Alan Wake 2 trailer looked awesome. And there was kind of a reveal in that trailer that merged three universes of Max Payne, Alan Wake, and Control. And maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode as that game comes out. But I'm really interested in that. I like those little things where, like, by the way, mind blown. This guy was this guy from this game, and
Right.
they're all in the same thing. So yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I sometimes I feel like a game has to be like completely narrative focused for me to like really get tuned into the narrative. I have a hard time following story. Like I've played through several Halo games now, and I don't really. I have to watch YouTube videos to figure out what's going on, and because like I play the game, I love playing the campaigns, and especially co-op and stuff. But I don't know. I just like I recall stuff as like it's brought up, but like I don't I it doesn't all the dots don't connect while I'm playing the game as to what's going on typically. So like games like Life is Strange, Gone Home, right? Like everything that's what your Firewatch, right? Like the whole it's a walking simulator where you're like, yeah, a little bit of puzzling or something like that, a couple of things, but like the whole gameplay is a narrative, and those I can get sucked into. But
yeah,
I have a hard time when there's like actual gameplay attached.
yeah. You're focused
And
on the gameplay, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah, and I'm a very
but
story heavy person. Like,
sure.
as a just a person myself, I love movies and like the story of movies. And I would say like I lean more towards being like a movie critic versus an average movie goer, and that kind of translates to games, right? I'm really about the story, and I want to get into it. You know, Tears of the Kingdom, thought it had an awesome story for a Zelda game. I was so into that. My daughter was into it, which made it even better. And Starfield, I hope, is the same, right? Obviously, it's a very expansive open world thing, but
Right.
I'm gonna be tuned into that story as much as I can be.
And I'm gonna be exploring every single
You're like,
planet and
I'm stealing
building
every
and
grilled cheese in the
right.
galaxy.
Yeah, right, right. All the sandwiches. But yeah, so that's funny. Yeah, I'll go ahead and move on to a few more that I've played, and then I kind of want to talk about some of the ones we've overlapped, like Age of Empires 2,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously Zelda is a big one.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, I busted out the Game Boy Pocket the other day, and then I pulled out Pokemon Silver. I played the crap out of Gen 1, and I've only beaten like Gen 2 once. I beat Silver one time, and maybe played a little bit of it otherwise, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna play through Silver again, and I don't even remember going through the Gen 1 region. at the end
Yeah.
of the game or anything. So because it's been 20 whatever 3 years since I've played it or beaten it. But I put it in there. The battery I had to swap the battery out in the cartridge. So I got a battery off of Amazon because it wasn't keeping my saves. Because it's got that internal clock and all that stuff. So I
Yep.
swapped that battery out, and I'm telling you, I love my Nintendo Switch, but when you're sitting in, I'm sitting in the parking lot today. I've got my kids in the van, and my wife's running into the grocery store. Nothing beats, pulling something out, like pulling a Game Boy Pocket out for 20 minutes. For that situation, right? Like, it's just like I don't know, carrying the Switch around and then jumping into the Switch game. Maybe if I get into more, maybe it's specifically a Pokemon thing as opposed to the Game Boy Pocket thing. But it's like I just had that thing right in my pocket, and it's just like it actually fits in my pocket. It is a portable console, not just a handheld console, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I don't know. It's been fun bringing that out, and I was like, gosh, I might be dipping a little bit into the retro stuff. And there's obviously the Switch Online stuff that I'm looking forward to jumping into some of that stuff. But I didn't mean to talk that much about Pokemon Silver.
That's
I've
fine
been playing.
with me. I didn't play Silver. I played Gold, but I wholeheartedly believe that's probably the GOAT in the franchise. Maybe besides like a Black and White, which we might get a sequel to or a remaster in the future. But at the time, for the scope of it, I mean, you can't beat it, right? You're talking about going back to Region 1 and everything, and just the portability and playability on a Game Boy Color or a Game Boy Pocket. I think the accessibility plays a big part of that. It's the game
Yeah.
to be able to start, stop, right? And then the accessibility, whoop, it's out, whoop, it's away, right? So yeah, I'm with you on that, and I think a lot of our listeners are probably too. Although I might have lit a fire by saying that was the GOAT in the franchise.
Right, right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, it's always been Gen 1 for me because I've only played this one once, right? I pretty much never stopped playing Pokemon Red. That was the first Pokemon game I had. I had Blue. I have somehow 3 copies of Yellow. And I've beaten Yellow several times. I've beat Blue a few times. I've probably put 800 hours into Pokemon Red.
Yeah.
Yeah, so uh kind of yeah, moving on to other things that I've played. Skyward Sword, I've been playing with my son. He loves playing that a little bit, and the controls on that, I will say, like I'm glad that I don't have to do motion controls. That's what it turned me off of the game back on the Wii, and so it's like it's playable now. There's some things that I don't like, the adjustments to controller controls, or real hands on sticks controls, I guess. But that's a hard one to play side by side with Tears of the Kingdom because it's like I'm just playing an inferior Zelda game, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but he wants to play that one, so I'm like, well, I'm gonna play what he wants. If he wants to play that, we're definitely gonna play that.
Yeah, you got to support the kids as a gamer dad, right? You're
Oh
like,
yeah,
a little
yep,
reluctant, but hey, you're playing games. That's cool.
yeah. I'm just glad he likes Zelda, and I
Mhm.
mean his name is Link, so it's good that he likes Zelda. But Yeah, I've beaten a Halo game every year since 2020. That I hadn't beaten previously. So Halo 2 before 2020 was the only Halo campaign that I had beaten. And so I've kind of on the mission to go through, those. So ODST is the one this year. Played a few hours with it with my nephews, and then they jumped off. So I didn't jump back in, but I'm just gonna jump in and finish it. It's a short game. Um, and but Eastward's a game that I've been playing, and I will finish. I really, really, really love Eastward. It's gameplay. It has some shortcomings, but it is such a I'm a sucker for the beautiful pixel art that retro indie and it's just
It's got a lot of
the
charm too,
colors.
right?
Yes, it does. And I mean, just down to the title sequence, I texted you, I was like, dude, you got to at least watch the title sequence of this game. I don't know. I thought it was really cool. It looks like, just like, I don't know, what would you call it? An anime or 90s cartoon type? Like, I mean, it
Yeah,
just
it was
has,
pretty sweet. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So, it's got cool music and I don't know. It's got a lot of charm in the game. So I've been really enjoying my time with that. So I'm gonna beat that. And still playing Fallout 4. And I don't know if I'll still play it. Will I still play it when Starfield's out? Like, I don't know.
Todd Howard's
I
like, I
feel like
don't
it's
even
gonna
know if we need a Fallout 5. This guy's still playing 4.
I'm still playing Fallout 4. Never stopped. Still haven't beaten it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a just a few of the other Nintendo games that I've played, with my son, family games, Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Kirby, and Super Mario 3D World. We've touched a little bit, but Kirby I've been loving. I want to play more 3D World, but Kirby I will probably go back through by myself and beat that at some point. And It Takes Two. I started playing with my wife. That was the first non like 2D slow moving platformer that I have gotten her to play. And
Okay.
she's like, I don't like 3D controls. And she was like, we started this game and she was like, couldn't jump from, one platform to the next. And then like 2 hours later, she's like, dragging me through some of these boss fights, and I was just like, oh, she's laughing, having a good time, and
That's
all that
awesome.
stuff. So I was thrilled to like find a game that she was actually enjoying, that I was, like that I really wanted to play.
Yeah.
Um,
And now is that
it takes
full
two.
3D? Is that like literally you can pan the camera and look around and run 360 degrees, or is it that kind of 2.5D type thing where it's 3D but
No,
you're
it's
platforming?
3D. Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's 3D. Yep.
Okay.
There might be some 2.5D elements to it, like
Yeah.
some certain
Certain
time. There
areas.
definitely are. There are definitely
Yeah.
times that you go 2.5D, but it's such a cool like asymmetric co-op game. It's awesome. It's really awesome. I mean, it's a great way to maybe get somebody that isn't so much of a gamer into it, but like honestly, two gamers, like if you uh I think it's a really good, like it's
Yeah.
just a good puzzle game, and a good and there's good boss fights, and there's good platforming, and it's a good game. It's a really good game.
Sweet. Yeah, I have it on my wife's Series S queued up and ready to play. I just got to convince her. So sounds like if I can get her over the hump, then she might actually enjoy it.
Yeah. So the big one. Well, we could talk about if we want to talk about Age of Empires as well. A couple games that we kind of played together. I think are Age of Empires, and then we sat on party chat playing Tears of the Kingdom.
Hmm.
Um, do we want to talk about Age of Empires at all before? Or
Yeah, we can briefly touch on it. Let's give it a couple minutes. So
yeah.
Age of
So
Empires, yeah, we played number 2 definitive edition on the Xbox, right?
Yeah, so for an RTS, the moving to console controls or controller, as opposed to mouse and keyboard,
Hmm.
did a pretty good job, right?
Hmm.
Um, I was pretty impressed with it. I hadn't played a ton of RTSs, so you probably have a little more experience, if I'm not mistaken. You
Yep.
probably played Age of Empires 2 back when it was, like, originally released.
Yeah, played it a
Um,
lot. Played it a lot.
I I heard real time, and that to me like put that shot clock alarm for me, where I was like, oh, I don't want that pressure. But man, we jumped into that. I've loved Civ 6 in the past, or we played Civ 6, Civ 5. So it's just like I like those games. I'm like, okay, those are turn based. I can handle turn based.
Yep.
But I would even feel a little bit of pressure there when playing multiplayer. So I was like, oh, I can't do real time strategy. But I finally jumped into Age of Empires 2, and man, was that a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think for listeners that maybe correlate to us in our different play styles or have friends with different play styles, I think something like Age of Empires 2, it really behooved us to play that together because I could focus on one type of play style while you focused on the other, but we were ultimately on the same team. It could help each other, right? So you were kind of building up these forces and doing certain things while I was like getting out more. I was trying to build units a little faster. I was playing a faster pace, and that was fine, right? You could play your
yeah,
game, I could play my game, but it was ultimately a symbiotic relationship in defeating the enemy. And they were kind of doing the same thing, right? The AI, they're trying somebody would
sure.
like Zerg rushing us or building up a fence, but I was getting out to the forefront, trying to build a wall, put some units out there, and you're like, I'm building this and I'm building this wonder and yada yada yada. And it
Right,
was like, and
right.
that actually saved us a couple of games where we won because of that, right? Because of that balance.
Yeah.
So if you're a listener and you have friends that are different play styles, consider a game like Age of Empires or another RTS where you can play co-op. It might work pretty well.
Or different play styles complement each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That made it. That's probably what I love so much about it, right? Is that I'm playing with you, right? Like you're a different type of, you've got different things going on. You play differently, and like I get to, we play board games and it's called turtling.
Hmm.
Like when you just kind of stay back on home base and just build around your home base and try to like make that the best, and you don't really want to deal with the combat or the conflict and stuff. and you're up there building, preparing for that conflict, and where I get to, I just kind of get to stay home and build, manage things back there, and that was. Yeah, that was I really really enjoyed that, and it kind of gives a little bit of that board game feel too, right? So
Yeah, and that's the whole point of remote play, right? We're playing together but apart,
that's
and
right.
having fun doing it. And so, like, I feel like we have to have like a remote play stamp, like those night remote play certified.
Right, right, right.
But no,
Played remotely.
yeah, paid for by
But
remote play podcast.
yeah, sure. But all right, yeah. So Tears of the Kingdom, right? Are we
Yep.
ready for this one?
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah. So between the two of us, we've got over 300 hours into the
Hmm.
game. And you've played and beaten it. I'm at 110 hours. I'm still playing it. I played I'm in the Gerudo Valley right now or whatever. Trying to work through that. Getting that temple and everything. So and then hopefully wrap it up. At least beating Ganon or Ganondorf. I'm sure is the final boss. So
Maybe.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I would assume, right? The Ganondorf is
Yeah.
we've been leading up to this point the whole time.
It's
So
Beetle.
I it's Beetle. Jingle comes from nowhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's uh yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, and then that's a game that I'll play for a long time just to get the shrines, and there all the shrines, all the light roots. Like I said, there's some things that I'll get. I kind of want to get some more gear before I take on Hyrule Castle.
Hmm.
Because I don't have a whole lot of armor for this point of the game. I haven't done a single armor upgrade.
You're
I
definitely
like
gonna want that for these
I,
boss
I've gone
fights.
I've gone to the fairies where they're armor upgrade and they're like, no, something about a violin, and I'm like, what? I don't have a violin, and then
Yeah.
it's like, so you don't spoil it, bro. I'll figure it out or I'll look it up. But
Yeah.
um,
Just spoil it yourself.
but but yeah, so yeah, so I'm still in the like in the meat of it and really enjoying it. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Right, you've played it start to finish. You put in 200 hours. Tell us
Yeah,
about
it was
Tears of
a
the
lot of
Kingdom.
time, right? And a lot of that time was with my daughter watching. She loved it. Loved like this. This was her foray into video games in a way. Like I said, she played Stray and some other things, and has watched me play kind of family friendly games. But it was like this was the perfect marriage of like, okay, there's no blood, there's no gore. It's a hero against a bad guy. Like she gets the good guys, bad guys thing, so she can watch, which enabled me to play this game a little bit more versus Diablo, where I got to play when the kids go to bed or whatever, or when they're out of the house.
Mhm.
So that made it easy for me to get to that 200 hours. And the game's fantastic, right? There's so much to do. It's an improvement on Breath of the Wild. Does it have as big of an impact as Breath of the Wild? That can be up for debate later because that was such a game changer. But it is an improvement on that game. The story is great. The animation is great. I have some minor gripes with the game, but I don't think anybody that's a Zelda fan or an open world fan would be disappointed in playing this at all. And I will, like you, definitely revisit it. There's still things I want to do. I did upgrade my armor, so I'm not going to go back and do that. But you definitely need an armor upgrade, I think, to beat the final bosses. But yeah, it's a strong game of the year contender for me, and maybe we'll touch on some of the other ones here in a little bit. But what are your thoughts halfway through this game? Is it the best one you've ever played? Is it the game of the year? Is it the game of the century? Or do you also have maybe some minor gripes with the game?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to a buddy about this today too, who's I think actually got about 30 more hours than you do in the game, and he got all 152 shrines, all 120 light roads, and we were getting in, and we were just sitting here like tearing the game apart, really, as far as like we were ripping into it, and it was just like, and then at some point in the conversation, we're like, just so we're clear, like either side of us, like both of us are like, we just wanted to make sure that like this is an all-time great game. Like that
Yeah.
we understood that we were talking about an all-time great game. And the nitpicking that we're doing is because we're like, is this the greatest game of all time or is it the second or third or fourth greatest
Yeah.
game of all
It's
time? At
because
least
you
in
love it
regards to us.
too, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's just like there's so much passion into the game that it's like you're gonna notice every detail. So the great things, but also the things that are maybe that do fall a little short and stuff. And um so I'm still absolutely loving the game, and but the longer that like like time goes on, I don't even know if it's gameplay like hours played in the game, but like it's been a lot different for me this time. It's taken a lot longer to get to 110 hours than it did for me in Breath of the Wild, where I had 80 hours in the first 10 days, and
Mm-hmm.
I got another 30 probably in the next four.
Mm-hmm.
So um, it's been stretched. I mean, I'm still playing a lot in comparison, but one thing that like it's the longer that time I've sat on this game, I have a lot of hours played, the more I'm like, I feel like Breath of the Wild, like we said, maybe made a larger impact. So there's that type of thing. Um, and I've talked about the puzzle games that I like, right? Like Portal and all that stuff. The logic puzzles, the logic based puzzles are really what I'm a fan of. And while a lot of them were maybe pretty straightforward in Breath of the Wild, that's what they were. And one of the nitpicks that me and my buddy talked about today, where the was just like the traversal, like they give you this sandbox, right? All these tools, and they're like, so sorry, I just knocked my um, so they give you all these tools. I gotta stop talking with my hands. They give you all these tools to just go break the game and do whatever you want. Play the game the way you want to play, which is really cool and creative. But like when it comes to traversing the land, I don't explore the surface that much because I can go hit a tower and just fly wherever I need to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And so because that option is there, and it's like, oh well, just don't do it. And it's like, well, no, it's there, so I'm gonna do it. And same thing with like so the Goron Temple. I think I talked about this last episode too. Like when I was playing the puzzles as designed, that was when I was enjoying it the most. And then like I cheesed a part of it because like of all like the climbing and the whatever the abilities and stuff that allow me to do that. And I got through it and I was like, well, that was less satisfying than the rest of this temple.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's cool that it exists. I think it's an absolutely amazing like product. It's so impressive what they've done in Tears of the Kingdom, the developers and all that stuff, that whatever the team that made it. But there's and I love some of the quality of life improvements from Breath of the Wild, but like I don't think some of them there's too much for a controller that you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do sometimes. But uh, yeah, I all time great game. Again, back to what I was saying about my gripes. Like it's just because I love this game so much, and I was just like thinking about it, and it's just like, at some point you start picking apart a little bit of the
Yeah, yeah,
shortcomings.
and you want
But
it to be perfect, right? Because it is that near perfect
yes,
game, at least of this game type in this franchise,
yeah,
right?
and that's where you start nitpicking, right? Is
Yeah.
okay, it's so close to perfect that I got to pick apart why it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And I would
Yeah,
definitely agree about the traversal, right? They give you so many options that 90% of them became redundant, right? Like I barely rode a horse around, and they kind of try to force you to do that sometimes with the Koroks. It's like, boom, oh, by the way, here's a wagon and a horse. There's Korok needs to
like
go down
I'm
there.
not using a wagon and a horse.
Yeah, and to no spoilers, but to your violin thing, the horse comes into play there. There's other spots where it's like, come on, use the horse, and
Right.
you don't necessarily need to, right? And a lot of people just build their own thing, which is very cool. It's very cool that they put that in, but the game's at odds with itself sometimes
Yeah.
because of the amount of options that you have, and I think that's a fair gripe. And the weapons, I think, is a big deal for a lot of people. For me, not so much. Like I made it through Breath of the Wild, it was a little annoying. Weapons broke. They tried to alleviate that here with the fusing, which I think within the confines of this game was a good solution, right? Without totally reworking the system
Sure.
and making it a totally new game, since this is like an add-on or an extension of that previous game. That was a good solution, I think, and it worked for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm one of the weirdos that I don't want to say I liked. No, I kind of like the weapon breaking. I don't like as from like Breath of the Wild as how unforgiving or how
Mm-hmm.
quickly the weapons deteriorated. I love it was an organic way to like force you to try other things, and it's just like it comes in, and then you come like, oh dude, I'm beating this guy with a broom, or a mop or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
just like you wouldn't have that scenario if it's like, okay, you got the master sword and it never, I mean the master sword loses energy or whatever, but you don't get that till later in either game. But like it's not like you just get a good weapon and you're like, okay, I'm gonna use this until I get a better weapon, and then I'm just gonna use this until I get a better weapon. It's just like you're always picking up, and like I don't know, that sense of like I'm just picking up what I can find. Oh crap! I gotta take on this guy. Grab this stick, and I'm just gonna start hitting
Yeah.
you with this stick. And then you beat him, and you're like, oh, my stick broke. I'm just gonna pick up his arm and start beating people with that. To me, it's like it creates so like I don't know, so like a lot of character and a lot of charm in the game that you wouldn't have if it was just and there's things that I do miss about the traditional Zelda formula. I mean, I miss the hook shot and stuff like it, and the way that puzzles were designed around that and things like that. But yeah, it's almost like almost two different franchises with the same IP. Like
Yeah, yeah,
at this
definitely.
point is what it feels like. Um, uh, but
Yeah, the thing with Tears of the Kingdom too is that it's very good for creative people, I think. If you're a creative person in any kind of way, you might enjoy this game more than a traditional gamer. Whereas with Breath
mhm,
of the Wild, there was less creativity involved, and it was still open world, but there was still ways to play your way, and there was only a couple options, but it all worked so well, it's so well formulated. And here they gave, again, so many options, so many things for creativity, but maybe if you don't want to play that way or you're not that type of person, you might find this game not lackluster, but that might be a sore eye on the game, right?
yeah, I don't think lackluster is a thing you can use to describe
Yeah.
Tears of the Kingdom for sure.
Yeah.
I mean it's double Breath of the Wild,
Yeah.
if not more.
Yeah.
Right? So and it's a more impressive game than Breath of the Wild. I love the ascend ability and stuff, but like
Yeah, it's a
that's probably
technical
my favorite
feat,
thing of the
right?
two.
And masterpiece that
Yeah,
they added these certain
it-
things, and the
just
physics engine's done
absolutely
by
amazed.
four guys, right?
Yeah.
So it's incredible. Like from a development point of view, and we've talked about that on the previous episode of this podcast. We're going to talk a lot about the development side of things and publishing and what makes a good game. This is a technical masterpiece to get this running on that Switch
Absolutely.
hardware and
Absolutely.
add all these things on top of the Breath of the Wild, which was already impressive, right? So
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of that, yeah, a lot of that stuff is really cool. And it's fun to play with. And I just don't know where I'm gonna stand still yet.
So I'm going to ask you point
And
blank right now, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, which one do you pick up and play? I tell you, you can only have one game, one of these games for the rest of your life.
well, I have to beat Tears of the Kingdom, so I have to say Tears of the Kingdom because I can't go on uncompleted. Because I've completed Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
But ugh, it might TBD. All right, can I
Okay.
say TBD? I gotta
Yeah.
beat the game
So
first
you're
because
kind
I
of
love.
fifty-fifty. You're really thinking about it.
I
For me,
really am because I love the temples and I love the bosses in Tears of the Kingdom way, 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 way more than Breath of the Wild. I love the compared to the Breath of the Wild had the test of strength shrines.
mm-hmm.
Hated those. Those were terrible. The little where you walk in and you don't have any of your gear and you have to do I can't I'm just the construct trials or whatever they're called, where
Yep.
you have to go beat the little constructs. So much better, in my opinion, than the test of strength from Breath of the
Yeah,
Wild shrines.
I
But
would agree.
I love the puzzle solving shrines from Breath of the Wild. Overall, I think more. I just like that I had to solve them logically, and I couldn't just cheese them.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
all right, and I gotta ask you the same question though.
Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's a
Yeah.
way better game for me personally than the previous one, and that's saying something because that was like a masterpiece at the time for Breath of the Wild, right? Completely game changing, plus the impact of the Switch and the attach rate, and it was just the zeitgeist, right? And it's kind of become zeitgeist as well with Tears of the Kingdom. But I think it's a big improvement on something that I didn't think could be improved much. I think last
Sure.
time we asked this question to ourselves a few weeks ago. We're like, where do you go from here from Tears of the Kingdom? But we
Right.
asked ourselves that about Breath of the Wild years ago. We said, how do you top this? Where do you go? And they did it, right? And so
Yep.
I would rather play Tears of the Kingdom. I think the story's much better. I think the bosses are much better. Like you said, they're not the best in all of gaming, but for Zelda, they're pretty good. And they're a huge improvement over the Guardian stuff from the the Breath of the Wild. So no knock to Breath of the Wild, but for a personal pick, I'm going Tears of the Kingdom all the way.
Yeah.
And so Tears of the Kingdom, easily in the Game of the Year conversation. So maybe we should jump over about some of the games coming out and some of the Game of the Year contenders to round out the show. So is Tears of the Kingdom the de facto Game of the Year going into this discussion at the end of the year? I know we have games coming out and we're going to talk about that, but up to this point, do we say, hey, this is the game to beat, or is that not possible? And I think this might get into, not heated between us, but in general, the gaming population might get heated over this topic just because Tears of the Kingdom is kind of an extension of Breath of the Wild and not more of the same, but in a way, people could argue that. There could be a lot of back and forth on this. So is it the de facto game to beat for Game of the Year this year?
It's definitely the game to beat. And I think from May 12th until whenever the Xbox showcase was, the not E3 Xbox showcase, I think most people had an unquestioned game of the year. I think still a lot of people do. I think people, we saw that Starfield Direct, and people thought, could that compete with
Like, wait a second.
Tears of the Kingdom?
Yeah.
Because that Starfield Direct for 45 minutes, best video game showcase, I think, before a launch of a video game that we've ever had.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, you don't get a lot of deep dives into games, so it's kind of unprecedented in a way, but when you get some showcases and clips, like the God of War one was really good at E3 back in the day. But yeah, you might be right on that.
Yeah. And so, there's Spider-Man 2 coming out. I think the presence that, like the longevity in the conversation, right? Like people were sending TikToks of Tears of the Kingdom for months. They're still sending them, right? You'll still see them, or YouTube videos, right? Like games like Zelda, the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they stayed around in the media forever. Bethesda RPGs stay around in the media. People are still playing Skyrim. People are still playing, and there's such a community that gets built around those Bethesda games and stuff. And I'm still playing Fallout 4, right? So
good point.
and I think that the Spider-Man is a game that you play, you're absolutely amazed by, you beat it, and then like you move on. And not to say it falls short or anything as far as like a good game or quality of game or anything. It's just the type of game that you get with something that you put hundreds of hours into, and you dive into like all these like, oh, how do I do all these little tricks or whatever, and how do I beat this game and speedrun it, that you get with like Tears or all the mods and stuff that you're going to get from a Bethesda game. I think those, when it comes to voting for the Game of the Year in December, that's gonna make more of an impact. I think it's Tears of the Kingdom. We'll see here once Starfield comes out here in a few weeks.
And we would be remiss. I think we're missing a big game. I mean, there's a couple of games, so maybe let's go back and forth really quick through our list of upcoming games. We don't have to give a ton of thoughts on them, but then we go back into the Game of the Year conversation. So you mentioned Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, man. I mean, this could be Game of the Year. I know I said it last episode, but the at the time of this recording, the impressions are coming out, and they are very, very strong. Not many full reviews yet, just because of the size of the game and how late they got the review codes. Now, I don't think this one necessarily qualifies on my list, but the Cyberpunk update and essentially remaster, like, that's wild. We can talk about that in its own right in another episode. Payday 3 may not be Game of the Year, but it's
Talking
coming
games
up.
that we're excited about, though, right?
Yeah. Alan Wake 2, right? Spider-Man 2 you mentioned, a Mario RPG, Metal Gear Collection, not necessarily Game of the Year, but looking forward to that one coming out. What's on your list?
Yeah. So, I guess big ones that I want to finish are so Cyberpunk 2077. I have not finished the game, so at this point, I'm like, well, do I just pick up where, like, because I haven't played since, I don't know, like several months after it came out, within a year after it came out.
Mhm.
And so I lost my disc for a while. It was in our move.
You got to
And
start clean then, I think. If you got this
I
huge
finally found
update
it.
and
I found it.
remaster.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's gonna be a completely different game than what I was playing before.
Hmm.
But it so the Phantom Liberty is a good excuse to get back into it. And um, we talked about Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 4 is supposed to be coming to console and to Game Pass. So that's something that I'm at least gonna want to check out and jump into. And Baldur's Gate 3, you mentioned. I'm pretty certain I'll play this game at some point. I don't know if I'll play it this year.
Hmm.
And I'll pick it up on a sale. It's Steam Deck verified, so I'm just like that's where I will probably play it. If it comes to Xbox, there's a good chance I'll play it on that.
Hmm.
Hopefully it comes soon. I think it'll end up there. I think they just need some more time to just get things working there or whatever.
Hmm.
And also, I think a big thing is it launched a month early on PC, and which is why the reviews were kind of rushed because and then I think they were just avoiding Starfield, so they're like, there's no rush to get this out on Xbox right now because we're just
No one's going to
who's going
play
to
it
be playing
anyway, right?
right. Everybody's going to
In
be
a
playing
way.
Starfield.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, and you know, uh, and they're going to be competing with a more well-known game or well-known studio type of game than a bigger game that I don't want to say bigger game, right, but
Hmm.
um yeah, just a more well-known game that's going to be on Game Pass, right? Like, and
Hmm.
it's like I can play this on my Game Pass subscription, or I can pay 60 or $70 or whatever it is for this other game that's yeah. So
And Baldur's
but
Gate 3
anyway,
might not be for everybody, right? Like it's very D&D based. Granted, the hype around it is pulling more people in, I think, but to your point, I think Starfield's
absolutely,
more
yeah. It
approachable.
jumped to number one on PSN pre-orders or something, on
Yeah,
the
dude, and I
PlayStation
think I
pre-orders,
sent you a
and
thing that was like they expected 100,000 concurrent players and they got 700,000, and that was the
700,000,
PC launch, right? It took
and that's
Steam
like
down for
yeah.
a while.
Yeah, and that's it's cruised into the top 10 top concurrent players on Steam of all time.
Hmm.
Absolutely incredible. Excuse me. Absolutely incredible was something that I which is it's been killing me because I'm like, gosh, again, I just want to jump into it. I want to play this. This is definitely a type of game that I would love. I love
Hmm.
Divinity, Original Sin 2, and but yeah. So back to other games that I actually will play this year. Oxenfree 2 it came out.
Hmm.
To me, I will probably try to play that in October. It feels more like a Halloween game. I loved the first Oxenfree. Loved the
Yep.
first Oxenfree. That's a top five indie for me. I played through it like three times because it changed
Different
like
endings and
thing previous
changes.
playthroughs.
Yep.
Changed thing for free to yeah. So Oxenfree 2 is definitely a game I'm looking forward to playing. Um, there's I would like to play either there's Sea of Stars coming to Game Pass and
Oh, I forgot
PlayStation
about it.
subscription, right? And also in the same genre is that Star Ocean 2 remake.
Yep.
And so those I want to at least jump into one of those. If I get I'm planning on getting a treadmill here, so I think those would be great treadmill games, as well as Mario RPG.
We need to have another
Uh,
separate chat about this because I was thinking about treadmill games recently, and yeah, we'll talk about it in another episode, I think. But that's a great idea.
sure. Yeah. So those are some of the big ones, and then there's a few games that I like that are kind of sitting on my I'm playing and I want to wrap up. As far as After Party is one, which is the
Hmm.
same developed
Same
the
devs.
same team that did Oxenfree. The Celeste DLC, the Chapter 9 Farewell. Getting through that. Death's Door. Will of the Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and
Oh,
then
how have you
Pentiment are
not
games.
finished that? It's so good.
Dude, I loved the Blind Forest, and then I jumped right into the Will O Wisps, and I just kind of like, okay, I've had enough Ori for now. And I think Cyberpunk maybe came out
That
when I
was
was like playing
yeah,
through
I
it,
remember
and
that. Yep.
so yeah,
I
so I
played
just
both
kind of
back to
fall off.
back. I couldn't put it down, man. It was so good, and the second one was such an improvement on the first one. It was insane.
I think I think I was talking to a buddy the other day about that. This compared to, he hasn't played the Ori games and he loves Metroidvanias. He just beat Hollow Knight, completed 102% or whatever Hollow Knight. He's beaten the game multiple times now, and he loves Hollow Knight. And he's never played, like, he loves his Metroidvanias, and I was like, Ori, I might prefer Ori over Hollow Knight. I think there's things that Hollow Knight does that are way better, and it's like a I don't know if there's depth, but like Ori is stunning visually. I mean, they're both stunning, but Ori is just like, I mean, it's in a league of its own. I feel like, and that actually is funny. It's because like the story there is probably
It's so good, right? They tie it
yeah.
all in this beautiful package. The story is excellent with the visuals, and there's actual emotion you feel. You might not get that in Hollow Knight. Like the story's good, don't get me wrong. Like, and it's an engaging game and a great game at that. But yeah, Ori's just on a different level of presentation, probably.
Yeah. Presentation's a good way to put it, because it's like, like I said earlier, story's not usually something that grabs me when gameplay is involved, but that was one. And the Entropy Center, I talked about that a little bit. That's I picked that up, and it looks like it's like a shooter puzzle portal type like game. So hopefully that one's not too long of a game, and I can just jump in and play that in a few hours and
Cool.
get my portal fix.
Yeah. You're like, I need it quarterly.
Hey,
Semi.
because I'm not getting Portal 3. I'm not getting
Come
a
on,
number
Valve.
3 from Valve. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So out of the games we listed, let's circle back to the Game of the Year discussion. What is contending against Tears of the Kingdom? I think we talked about Starfield for sure. Baldur's Gate 3. What are your other ones? Do you think fighter games like Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat have any chance?
I think this is the best year in a long time that we've had for fighting games. I don't think they stand a chance.
Yeah. They're just not like zeitgeist
We've got
mainstream
right,
type
right.
stuff, right?
I love Mortal Kombat, but I don't. I might. We didn't even mention any of these fighting games. It's like I enjoy fighting games, but I think they're just too niche.
Yeah.
They're widely popular within their niche. Not widely is not. They're very passionate, right? And it's not like a small niche, but it is niche.
Yeah, it's not a mainstream, right? Like people know, like, oh, if you say Mortal Kombat
Yeah,
or Street Fighter, they know of it.
right.
But like,
People know
there's a
Mortal Kombat.
culture within that small
Like
market
there's
segment.
Evo, right? There's like there's the kids that played Mortal Kombat in their Genesis growing up, and that like and people that don't even play video games anymore, right? That there's like, oh yeah, Mortal Kombat, but like, and there's movies and stuff, but or Street Fighter I think is a well-known name too, right? But yeah, there's it's I don't think it stands a chance. I think Hogwarts Legacy is a game, just the IP, right? The Harry Potter IP is massive. That one was something that was widely
Widely played.
hit a wide audience,
When you're
right?
talking
Like
about
that
concurrent players and downloads and stuff,
that
that's
game
up
sold
there.
consoles, right?
Yeah.
That game sold PS5s,
Yep.
and maybe a couple Xboxes, but I think because PlayStation had the marketing there that did really well with getting that marketing deal, that people just tied it to PlayStation, and if they don't know video games, they're just like, oh, I could pick this up on the PlayStation because that's what
Yeah.
the commercial says, kind of thing. But
What about Final Fantasy 16, Diablo 4,
there's I think
Jedi
Survivor.
Dead
If
Space
Survivor,
remake?
well, Resident Evil 4 has been a remake has been one that's
Yeah.
been talked about that I've seen, which I don't know how I feel about a remake being game.
Can a
Like
remake get Game of the Year? That's
right, first off, did RE4 and Dead Space get Game of the Year in the year they came out? And it's like, can they, if they didn't, can they get remake? Can the remake get a Game of the Year? And especially in a year that is
right.
absolutely loaded with games. And then also, if it did, can it get Game of the Year twice? That doesn't sound fair either. Um, but yeah, I think Resident Evil, out of the remakes, Resident Evil has probably got the chance to be nominated. Um, and but I don't see, maybe Final Fantasy. I don't think Final Fantasy sold enough. I think I think it's sold fine for the situation it's in. It's not multi-plat.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they expected, I'm sure they got a big old check from Sony to keep it exclusive,
But it's
and
not enough to
so
push it
they're happy
over.
with the money they've gotten from it, but it hasn't sold and become what. But I think people that love Final Fantasy 16 really love Final Fantasy 16. The boss fights sound like they're just absolutely insane in that game. Some of the best boss fights ever in video games is the impression that I'm getting. I don't have a PlayStation, so I haven't played it,
Right.
but
Let me give you some.
but yeah,
Let me give you some scores here, just to give you some context. So if I go to Metacritic, which is kind of aggregating stuff together, by this year game releases, Tears of the Kingdom 96 at number one, Metroid Prime Remastered 94. There's another remaster. I don't think that
true.
can beat Tears of the Kingdom, right? But it's up there, and that's another, can a remaster get a game of the year? Resident Evil 4
Right.
with a 93. There was Tetris Effect Connected and Witcher 3 Complete Edition. I'm going to leave those out for now. Street Fighter
Sure.
6 with a 92. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that was an expansion. Diablo 4 is the next one with 91. Rogue Legacy 2 with a 90. Let's see, Persona 4 Golden, but that's, I think, a re-release on Switch, right? Let's see other new ones. Dead Space with an 89. Hi-Fi Rush with an 89. So Dave the Diver at an
Yeah, I think
89. Final Fantasy
that game.
16 is
That's
down
that's
there
a
with
game I want to jump
87.
into too.
87
But
on FF16, by the way.
sure. Yeah. So I think Metacritic ratings play a factor into
It gives you a
game of
general
the year, but
idea, right?
yeah, but you get like some really good niche games, right, that get rated well, or you get like remaster, like the Metroid Prime remaster. Yeah, but as far as Diablo, I think any shot that it did have went to their foot. They shot themselves in the foot with some of the recent the season one stuff and
The bad patch and
um
rolling back the patch, and yeah, I think that
yeah,
hurt their chances a little bit, right?
yeah,
Let me do this again really quick. Let me give you the previous game of the years and the listeners. What were the previous game of the years for just the Game Awards? I know there's all sorts of sites and different groups and stuff, but the Game Awards from
yeah.
2014 on. So we've got Dragon Age Inquisition. 2015 was Witcher 3. 2016 Overwatch. 2017 Breath of the Wild. And we've talked about this before. PC Game of the Year at the time was Divinity Original Sin 2 by Larian, who's doing Baldur's Gate 3. 2018 God of War. 2019 Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. 2020 Last of Us Part 2. 2021 It Takes Two, and Elden Ring for 2022. So a good spread of different types of games there. But yeah, you're talking high quality stuff, and I'm looking at the list we mentioned, and I don't know. Trying to think like what is that good to stand among giants like that, and I've got to say probably Tears of the Kingdom, Hogwarts Legacy. I haven't played, but I totally agree with your points. Spider-Man 2 is a maybe. Like part of me
But
says
like those
no, but then
Spider-Man games,
part of me says no because hey, it's just like an action-oriented story Spider-Man game. Like yes, it can be great, but is it game of the year? Like is it that groundbreaking? But then I look and I'm like, Last of Us Part 2, kind of a similar situation. Well, granted, much higher production quality in that, but it's a sequel. It's kind of that action-oriented story game. I don't know. Does it have a shot? Maybe. And Starfield and Baldur's Gate 3, man. I think your three heavy hitters from my perspective: Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, Tears of the Kingdom, outside shot with Spider-Man 2 and Hogwarts Legacy. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
my thoughts are I think Baldur's Gate 3 is putting Larian and Baldur's Gate as an IP on the map.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think and I don't even say that it's not a game of the year material game where with the popularity of the IP and all that stuff in 2023 where we've had one of the greatest games in years in gaming period.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't think I just don't think it has a chance against Tears of the Kingdom or Starfield. I don't think really anything does. I think the you know your remaining nominees are, we'll see what Spider-Man 2 does. It's going to be at least close enough to the video game awards coming out in mid-October.
Mm-hmm.
to where, it's still at least going to be, talked about and stuff when voting is really going on. I think that's how it works, right? And I could be mistaken there, but that's how I understand it. But I think Hogwarts, just because of how widespread, um, and man, maybe Final Fantasy. It's Final Fantasy is has such a legacy, and 16 is getting a lot of positive. Like people really like it. I mean, so there's some like people that don't. It's not traditional turn-based
Yeah.
combat and stuff. So some of the core fans of so I don't know. But it seems like a pretty incredible game. And then there's yeah, I don't know. I was initially thinking like maybe like Jedi Survivor or something, but I don't at this point I don't think it had the legs.
Yeah, I don't think
I,
so. And it had performance
um
issues, right? Especially on
right.
PC.
I think if it came out and performed really well, I think it sounds like that people really loved it despite the performance issues that it
Yeah, I
had.
think
So
it can get a nominee, but I don't think it wins, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that Resident Evil 4 remake is a nominee as well. But
So give me your 1 through 3. Give me one through
1 through
three.
3.
What's game of the year?
Yep. Zelda, Starfield, Spider-Man.
Okay, so I'm gonna say I think it's gonna be. I haven't played it yet, but I think it's gonna be Baldur's Gate, Tears of the Kingdom, and Starfield.
Ooh,
And man,
those would be
I
my
might
three.
have to put Tears of the Kingdom on 3 and Starfield at 2 because I'm looking at this list again, and I'm looking at Dragon Age Inquisition, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Breath of the Wild, God of War, and Elden Ring, and all of those games took that genre and that franchise, if it was pre-existing, and just was groundbreaking, right?
Sure.
And so you're thinking Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield taking the RPG and just taking it to the next level. So much so that for Baldur's Gate 3, there's arguments among devs online saying, don't expect this from any other studio. You cannot behold us to this standard. This is once in a lifetime. Like you can't expect every game to be this groundbreaking, this many stories, this much voice acting, this many cutscenes, yada yada yada. And that to me says, man, this thing has a serious chance at being game of the year because it's groundbreaking in the franchise. And then at the same time, I'm like, well, Starfield. I look at that 45-minute.
I was gonna say they're saying that same thing about two other games this
Yeah,
year, and that's
that's true.
Starfield and Zelda.
And I think
Um,
I think what works against Zelda is still the optic of it being an extension of Breath of the Wild in the way. Do people not have fatigue, but I think there's enough mainstream, not that the mainstream people pick this award, but there's enough going against it in that it's more of the same, quote unquote. And we know it's not, right? We just
right.
discussed that. We love the game, but the optics of that, does that knock it down and does it propel these other two games, assuming they're good, assuming the reviews are great, Starfield and Baldur's Gate up higher?
I think it also had the advantage of coming into the year as the game to beat.
Yes, that's a
I
great
think as
point.
people are like, as long as they don't screw it up, Tears of the Kingdom will be the game of the year.
Right.
This was being said, December 31st of 2022, right? Like before this year started. And Zelda just has such a like, I think a pedigree among the people that choose these, like, and it gets reviewed, always gets reviewed highly. It always gets, like, and I mean, it was it's an amazing game, but like Skyward Sword also got reviewed really well, and also did like, and like, which arguably not as great of a game. I mean, it's good, um, but I think I don't know. But yeah, I think I hope I would love to see Baldur's Gate be in that. I kind of hope to see that, right? Like that's takes a step into like really core RPGs, kind of making this like step into the little more of a step into the mainstream. I think is what that would do for it, even if it gets nominated, right? And it would be the excitement that you'd saw like when It Takes Two got Game of the Year.
Right.
And yeah, that's a really good point.
It just makes you pause and think, right? Like, because
Yeah, for sure.
you have your own personal experience playing these. Like, I haven't even played Baldur's Gate or Starfield yet, but you fall in love with Tears of the Kingdom and you're somebody that's like, man, this is one of the all-time greats, which I truly think it is, but in the optics of it's an extension of the other game, does that work against it? And maybe it does. I don't know. We'll find out in mid-October when we start to see these awards trickle out.
Yeah. Yep. And
Yeah, so I think that might be about it for us today. Well, very curious to see what you guys think, listeners out there. What is your game of the year? What are your thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, any of these games we mentioned, or maybe we didn't mention? And Evan, I think they can find us on pretty much every social platform, right? If they want to comment or engage with us.
that's right. Yeah, we're currently not on X, Twitter,
X.
X, whatever,
It's
whatever you want to call it.
It's in flux.
Yeah. Maybe we'll end up there. We kind of just aren't sure what's going on with it right now. So, but we'll probably end up there at some point. Yeah, we'll see what it is. But yeah, you can find us. I mean, Reds. We're hoping to get the episode up on YouTube this time around. And Instagram, TikTok. We're gonna hopefully start rolling some content out on there.
Yep. And anywhere shorts. Podcasts can be found, right? Your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all of the stuff. We're out there.
Yep. And go ahead.
We'll leave a description with an invite to the Discord. We'd love to start getting some fans in there and get some community engagement, talking about different topics related to gaming and some not related to gaming. And the great thing is you can pick and choose what you want to listen to on that Discord server.
Yeah, absolutely. We're again. I'm just gonna say we're excited to be here. We really appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully, we can build some followers here, some people that enjoy being a part of the conversation. We're shooting for 60 to 90 minutes, and I think we're gonna be pretty much hitting at 90 minutes each week. And if we say we want to go to 75 to 105 minutes, we'll probably just hit 105. Well, I think we're gonna hit the ceiling of whatever one we say we're shooting for. So we're gonna say for now that we're shooting for 60 to 90 minutes. But I'm bi-weekly, right? Every other week is what we're planning on releasing here, and
give us your feedback, right? If you get an opportunity to listen to this and you have some honest feedback, it's good, bad, constructive, we'll take it in and we'll process it and go from there. We're making improvements each episode, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, whether it's a review or Discord, right? So Discord, we'd love to have you on the Discord, but if you just want to leave us a review, a rating, that would really help out our show, right? Get visibility. If you like it, that's what rating us will help us find others that might like it too.
Yep, like it, subscribe it, follow it. All the good things. So,
all those things.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for listening to Evan and myself, Mark, on the Remote Play Gaming Podcast. We'll catch you next time.